This episode, the truth about sex, what the world has to say about it, and what God tells us about it by means of our very bodies. All that and more, the Catholic Underground starts right now. You have hit the play button on the Catholic Underground. We are a podcast cutting through the noise and bringing you the topics that matter. It's episode number 446. For those of you keeping score at home, I'm Father Chris Decker, priest of the Diocese of Baton Rouge here in beautiful, sweltering Louisiana. It's only May and it's sweltering. But that's okay because Kathleen is always cool. Kathleen Lee joins us.
I thought you were going to say Kathleen is always sweltering, and I was like, oh, also true. Also true.
I would never, I might say.
You probably would, but I would sweat in a snowstorm. It's fine. It's fine.
But we're happy that you're here.
Thanks.
And no matter what temperature your forehead is.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Also here, Sarah Denny. Sarah is joining us as Olivia's stand-in because Olivia is on assignment tonight.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, I tell you. But we'll learn more about Sarah in just a moment. But first, we have to go up to the Jeff Star 1 near-Earth orbit satellite, which is merrily blipping and blooping along in low Earth orbit. Jeff Blackwell is our technical director. Hey, Jeff.
And in control of the bloops, by the way.
That's true. As long as the bloops bloop and blip in and out of sequence properly, then we're happy with it.
There, we are in sync, Father.
That's exactly right. Also, video is in sync by way of Ed Ball, who is in the ball pit, we call it. You see?
I like how you say that. I was trying to throw in some NSYNC references, but...
Oh, did I somehow make a 90s reference?
Okay,
yes, 13-year-old me went, JT? Lance Bass?
All I can say is bye.
Bye.
I know. Now I have dated myself.
It's okay.
Well, I'm celibate. I can do that. So there we go. All right. So Sarah Denny, well, we figured since we've got you here at the table that we just kind of give the table to you, for the episode.
Very generous.
Because Sarah, you join us from really quite a life lived in a very short period of time.
I have been blessed to have traveled a lot and learned a lot in my 32 years of living.
So Sarah, at 32 years of life, is a doctoral candidate.
Yes, I am.
And I know, right?
Yeah.
And
so
what's the doctoral candidate in? Like what is the...
So the field of study is, so I'm actually studying bioethics, which is, for the listeners, it's medical ethics. So the reason why I chose this field is because I love the idea of integration, and it's a field that integrates biology, philosophy, medicine, but also the philosophy and theology of the church, and then the law. So I've taken some law classes, some biology classes, philosophy, theology, all this. But my particular focus is actually women's health. So I also am a trained fertility care practitioner with the Creighton model. So in short, I teach women how to chart their cycles. And then for several years, I also taught high school girls, and then I worked as a campus minister in our college campus. So I'm trying to bring all of that to my paper in presenting my topic.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And as you say, bioethics is one of those fields that has a lot of beautiful little tendrils.
Ooh,
if bioethics, if it's a squid, then there are many tendrils that, that form it,
There are. I mean, that's the beauty of the field, and it's also the most humbling aspect to this field is that sometimes I step back and I'm remembering like, I'm getting a PhD in bioethics. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I know nothing. And I don't say that to like make fun. It really is like the field is constantly changing and growing because the reality is it involves science and medicine. And every single day there are intelligent people around the globe that are making incredible discoveries, right? Especially related to the human body. And so
that's really kind of beautiful too, to think that as we study the sciences, and especially the physical sciences and the science of our bodies, our biology, that there are still mysterious things that are being revealed about who we are and how we see ourselves as persons. And it's really interesting that God didn't just simply pre-install us with everything that we need to know.
Yeah, it's not on the hard drive. Can't like just search that file and find it.
Or maybe he did pre-install it, right, in original innocence. Although I have a feeling there still would have been, now this is speculative philosophy.
I like your speculation. Keep going.
But I suspect that God would still, because we are created in time, have desired to unfold the beauty of our bodies.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's something created, like a participation in his creativity as you discover.
Yeah. There's
the miracle,
an unfolding.
But it needs to be human.
And even in the garden, there was an unfolding of God's presence to Adam and Eve. They had a concrete, original innocence is they have a concrete understanding of this is God and he is creator and we are creatures, but there is still something that happens in a timeline.
Yeah.
And so if you look at how original sin kind of pops into the picture, and all of a sudden the things that were being unfolded in due course now are mysteries that have to be revealed in perhaps maybe a different key, but the same symphony.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't teach the course, but I do find it interesting for sure. So I suppose it's worth asking, how does one come to say, I think I'm going to go into the field of bioethics?
Great question.
Yeah, where does that come from?
So,
because that would be atypical, I would think.
Yes.
In today's world.
I was not 5 years old or even 10 years old thinking, I would like to study bioethics one day. But I did grow up. So my mother is a nurse anesthetist in labor and delivery.
Okay.
So she's been involved in women's health her entire life, or at least my entire life that I've known her, which is my entire life. And I just think medicine and hospitals are just such a place of meeting people and encountering Christ, really, in everyone, right? And so I grew up with a particular love and knowing that I was going to work with women one day. I was interested, so I was pre-med. And actually my first year of college, I took a women's studies class. And on the first day of class, we had to go around the room and we had to say our name, our biological sex, and our gender. Now, this was the spring of 2008. So now that might seem even more it's less shocking, but then I was like, wait, what?
That's right. Women's studies
that's
and
not
woman.
self-evident.
Right,
I was like, I'm
a
woman, I'm female. Duh.
Yeah.
But I learned that class was probably maybe the most important class I've ever taken, in the sense that it taught me there's always a bridge. And there's always a reason to listen to another person's story, because they don't just come up with ideas. Usually it's over time we develop and how we think about particular things. And so from that space, I started to see the world doesn't all think they don't all think like I think, you know, and maybe I'm not right on everything, but it sounds really simplistic, but I was like, okay, God, so what should I be doing? And I'd recently been exposed to JP2's Theology of the Body, and I really wanted to dive into that. So I feel like the Lord was like, well, I made women, so if you want to know what it means to be a woman, I could probably tell you. And I'm like, okay, great. So I went into theology from that perspective, but I kept studying the sciences. And then I was largely involved with a Women's New Life clinic, so a crisis pregnancy center of sorts, but it's kind of more than that. It's also a women's health clinic that we do, free pregnancy counseling and free ultrasounds. But as a Crate model practitioner, the flip side is also meeting women where they are in their needs, just their fertility at large. So infertility, or they want to know how to space out their children for natural family planning, those kinds of things. And so as I was completing my master's degree, honestly, the opportunity, it sort of just fell in my lap. People would tell me about this program and I was very interested in it. And then I just was like, let me just apply and see what happens. And then boom.
That's in the scriptures, isn't it? Right? Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Tightly packed, shaken down, pressed together, will fall into your lap. And
literally.
I suspect that's where we get the phrase from. But yeah, it's really interesting that if you're saying, okay, Lord, I want to know what you want me to do as I'm making my way forward. Yeah, that's how the Lord works.
And I really believe the Holy Spirit is he's that string within all of our life decisions and events, even the things that we're like, maybe that wasn't quite what I should have done. He literally goes through, so every class I've taken, every young woman I've encountered, whether in college ministry or high school speaking, or the moms I encounter in a lot of the talks that I'll give, everything has been preparation to be in the place that I am right now, which is writing a dissertation on women's health. I feel like every single person, every single event, has been in preparation for that. So I'm just grateful.
And I bet with Kathleen, because you've worked in this field as well, that those stories are so important.
Yeah, and when you work, you're so right when you're talking about that everyone does have a story, and it's important. We've talked about this so much on this show, or I have, is that it's when we stop listening to each other, when we stop learning how to discuss, when we stop learning from each other, that's when we get in trouble as a society as a whole. Right. And so, it's so important, I think, this study and our experience in this realm, to be open, but to know our stuff, to know the truth.
Exactly. And I think, so John Paul II is my hero, and I could talk about him for hours.
Right.
I'll spare you all.
He's a good hero to have.
But I think the thing that has inspired me most recently, especially in my dissertation, is that he was unafraid to sit across the table from someone who clearly disagreed with him on some major issues, right? Like he could sit across the table from a communist, and he wasn't expecting to change the person's mind, but he knew that the truth can stand on its own. And so he was able to look the other person in the eyes and listen to what they're bringing to the table, quite literally, and then be able to respond like, I hear what you're saying here, and I'm good. He's not afraid to share the truth, but the truth doesn't have to destroy the other person, right? He's they're free to choose. He can never go against their freedom, just like the Lord. But in love, he's always going to offer it.
Yeah. What's that? And you're gonna, you might be able to fill in this. I'm blanking on who said it, but paraphrasing. Like you don't always have to defend the truth. It's like a lion. Sometimes you just let it go and it defends itself.
Is that Captain of Siena?
I think so.
I don't even know. That's amazing.
I think so. But it's like as someone who, as all of us, sitting at this table, theologians, and I use that word.
Augustine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose. It will defend itself.
It will defend itself. There's so many times where I'm like, no, this is not true. Like you must
become the lion.
And it's like that has been such a freedom for me in the last 5 or so years to really sit with that and just be like, I'm gonna tell you the truth. And I've said that to students before. I'm like, I'm gonna tell you the truth. What you do with that truth is you. And the Lord is gonna now that you know the truth, you got the Lord, and the Lord's gonna follow. He's gonna follow you anyway, but you're gonna have to wrestle with that, with the Lord. And I'm here to help with that. But here's the truth.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, even as a pastor of souls. In fact, so far at every parish that I've been assigned the pastor in the last decade or so of my life, I say, and I mean this without any pretense, like I don't have much to give you. As Chris Decker, I don't have much to give you. But what I do have is I know that I have the possession of the fullness of truth because I'm a Catholic, right? And we know that it's there. And I will share with you the deposit of faith, presumably in charity. That's going to be my desire, is to share the deposit of faith with you in charity. And I'm not always going to get that right. But the beauty of again, listening to the stories of people is that you realize that the other person is not an object for me to conquer. It's not an object for me to encounter and then say, okay, where's my T-shirt because I've had that encounter. But it's a person who, as you say, not everybody thinks the same way that I do. Not everybody processes things the same way that I do. How do I bring them to the deposit of faith and to the fullness of truth that we are given in Scripture and sacred tradition, but perhaps in a way that is tailor-made to how the Lord made them?
Ooh, yeah. Which reminds me, we were talking before the show, but there's a book by Cardinal George that I really love, I've read recently, called The Difference God Makes. Highly recommend it, but it's all about the concept of dialogue and to be part of the culture, right? If you want to truly dialogue with culture, then we have to first love the culture. And so there is something to be said for, okay, we come from a particular culture as Americans, as people from the South, but there's a gift there, is that before we're like pointing the finger at, oh, here's all the bad things, it's like, no, I love the culture. And so I want to be able to look it in the eyes and look whomever in the eyes in love and say, this is what I have to offer, instead of just like turning our backs on it,
Yeah, because so many dialogues nowadays are just simply unilogues. They're monologues, And we all know, Jeff, that usually only a villain monologues before they unleash their plan. So we need more dialogue, because we're not talking about pitting two villains against each other. We're talking about persons trying to simply work our way through life together. And that's what we understand. We talk about the mystical body of Christ, is that we're not these unilateral islands unto ourselves.
Right.
And so we'll talk very much about that in our next segment, where we start talking about how the world sees this very field that you're going to be diving into as a doctor, right? So a doctor of bioethics would be a doctor of philosophy, right? Or is that a?
Technically speaking, it's from a pontifical university, so.
Oh, very nice.
Theology or philosophy, I guess you could go with that.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that. But first, we are the Catholic Underground. That's right. You have found your way into Catholic Underground. We are a podcast And we are a video cast, actually. You can watch us on Catholic Faith Network, on Catholic television, and anywhere these fine products are sold for free, actually. I'm Father Chris, joined by Kathleen. We've got Sarah in for Olivia this week. Jeff Blackwell is in space, as is Ed. And, of course, our picks of the week are going to be coming up at the very tail end of the show. And we're talking with Sarah Denny, and she is all about bioethics and every little thing that involves. And I thought it might be helpful for some of our listeners and viewers to kind of talk about the theology of the body / sex education piece to that. Mm-hmm. Because nowadays, sex education, that phrase is so loaded.
Ooh, it's charged.
It is charged, right? It's charged partially because of Planned Parenthood. It's charged partially because of like political footballs that are being bandied about. Yeah. And it's even charged in Catholic circles because we don't know how to define it without looking at these other sorts of things.
Absolutely.
And so I thought maybe, how does the world around us, our culture, view that very notion of sex education?
Yeah. So my dissertation topic is actually proposing what I would call a third way, so a middle ground option for sex education. So between there's two dominant models of sex education that exist currently in the States. One would be a comprehensive sex education, which is focused on what they call risk reduction. Yeah. And so they go into the schools. This typically happens in public schools. Planned Parenthood is the number one like machine. I call it a machine, but place that provides sex education in the nation. And what they do in terms of risk reduction is they're going to give you a lot of the science, but it's usually related to how to reduce the risk of getting pregnant. Now, also to, from getting STDs and things like that. So it's largely focused on, they do have videos, I will say, on their website. I don't recommend you go watch them, but they have now on their own website. It's a bot, so it's just this automatic thing, just so you know this exists out there, because I think it's important for parents to know. But you can ask any question you want to ask, and it prides itself on ask us the questions that you're afraid to ask an adult in real life. Oh. And you can ask any question whatsoever.
And the artificial intelligence will answer it for you.
About whatever topic. Yeah. So that's out there. But when they go into the schools, it's largely focused on what forms of contraception can we use, like this is how you use a condom, these sorts of things. Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that just the notion of looking at our biology as a risk to be reduced seems a bit objectifying. Now, obviously, I'm speaking as a priest and somebody who understands philosophy and theology.
Yeah.
But that seems loaded on the front end.
Well, and I can take it then. As a woman, so I feel like sometimes people will hear a priest or men speak and they're like, you can't say that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm a woman, so let me tell you what I know. And as a Creighton model practitioner, I know the ins and outs of a woman's reproductive cycle. Right. And the reality is that our bodies have a lot to say to us. And as a culture, what we have done, and especially in the medical field, is that we treat fertility like a disease. I mean, the reality is...
So we silence what our body is saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And chemically manipulate and shut it down. Most adolescent women... I mean, if you go into a room and you have 300 girls and you say, raise your hand if you've been offered the pill for acne or a headache, or I don't really know why you're tired, or, oh, your cycle isn't working the way
early onset cankle.
Anything. I mean, 90% of them would be on the pill.
Really?
Or at least I should say 90% would be offered. Most of them would be on the pill. It might be more offered, actually. I mean, I've usually when I ask this question, all but one raises their hand.
Yeah. Well, I know from my own experience and being involved in this topic is look, something is wrong, something is wrong with you. So let's, maybe you have, a weird cycle, let's put you on birth control to regulate your cycle. And then when you want to have babies, you have to get off of birth control. So and none of that is there's no
after it's already done the work of.
Well, and we haven't fixed anything. I haven't fixed anything. You know what I mean?
I mean, this is the reality. So I would like to say, I think it's schizophrenic the way that the culture treats women's fertility, right? So the
kind
average,
of like duct taping around your car, no matter what's wrong with it.
Yeah, and then you're expecting when you take that duct tape off, it's going to not just run, but run really well.
Yeah, like a new car.
So you think about the younger population. There's all these studies that have come out in terms of hormonal contraception's effect on adolescent women's bodies. The things that I find the most interesting are the effects of the central nervous system. So they're finding that the brain development is actually akin to in utero, right? You're sensitive to a lot of things that are happening.
Sure.
And there's a neuroplasticity. So there's this window, right, in which things are ebbing and flowing and changing, but that window is dependent upon a woman for female. It's dependent upon how her cycle changes the levels of her hormones, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, that makes sense because all of those glands, right, that are active have a direct effect on your central nervous system.
Absolutely.
Because that's what they're tied up in.
Hormones are like the superheroes in a lot of ways in terms of our bodies. And so what's happening is these women are not being given that opportunity to then develop in that way, which they've found can affect behavior patterns down the line. But the other thing too is that window will close at a certain point, and most women still aren't off the pill, you know, until after that window closes. They might be on it past 25. And then when they get off the pill, like people are wondering, well, so the CDC says that they pride themselves on we're trying to not just prevent pregnancy, but we're trying to help with infertility. And I'm like, this is ridiculous, right? Yeah. Because the very thing that you're putting into women's bodies and encouraging them to be on has a huge part to play in why infertility is on the rise. You can't expect to chemically manipulate a woman's body for more than half of her life and then take her off of that. I mean, she's not a robot and she's not an animal, right? She's a person. And it's not this Band-Aid approach. It's disrespectful to women. And the other thing, obviously I could talk about this forever. I'm getting a little fired up. It's my favorite thing. Is that, you know, the reality is we live in a first world country.
Yeah.
How do we live in a first world country? And I mean, if you go on the street, I'd love to do an interview with the average woman on the street. They are not going to know like 80% of just there is so much beauty to a woman's reproductive cycle. It's incredible. When I see certain things like the slides of the ferning pattern of cervical mucus, which takes different forms depending on the estrogen or the progesterone, which is going to either aid the sperm or prevent it from traveling to the egg, right? It's phenomenal. Like you look at that and you're like, there's totally a God. Like there's no way there can't be a God. And that to me, if you want authentic empowerment for women, you give them knowledge. So this is my argument. You give them knowledge, and we respect a woman's freedom enough to give her the knowledge and then to say, okay, this is also part of like her integration as a human being. Woman has an access, like through our cycles, women have an opportunity to literally connect with their very body. So my body's not a tool, this thing that's like a separate from me. My body is part of my person. And I can come to read these signs. We call them biomarkers, right? I can observe them. And then I can say, oh, wait, so this time of the month, no wonder why I'm really tired. Or no wonder why I just want to cry, even though like everything's really okay. And you learn, instead of being afraid of our bodies, instead of being like, it's not a biological determinism. I'm not determined by like, oh, I feel sad right now. It's
because our bodies are not a disease. That's the other part of it too, right?
Exactly. So it's what John Paul II talks about, honestly. He says integration is such that the person comes to know about themselves from within. We have this inner subjectivity, this inner world. And in that place, I learn how to govern myself because I am aware. And then from that self-governance, I am free. Like my freedom's not outside of me. No. I'm always free. And it's how I respond to the reality of who I am as Sarah, right? And it's powerful. I mean, that's empowerment.
So you talked about how the risk management sounds very businessy, right? Businesses are all about risk management.
It's very efficient.
That's one of the ways that
not very successful, but
no, exactly right. That's one of the ways that kind of public education looks at sex education. Right. Well, you said there was another one.
So the other common model would be abstinence-only education. Okay. And so that's when we, you know, kind of exactly what the name says. Okay, abstinence only. So don't have sex before you get married. And I would say the weakness of that, as a church, right, we're obviously teaching young people like until you're married, like the moral law is this, and there's a lot to be said for that. But I think even with the church's model, there's room for growth in the sense that I think as human persons, right, we are both body and soul. So as this composite, there's so much to understand about the person. And as a woman, my body affects my person because it's me, right? So what I'm arguing is that the gift of the church is that we have theology of the body, and that is like the tool. I think most abstinence-only programs up to this point, most of them don't even know what theology of the body is. It's just
don't do this.
Yeah, don't do this, and you're like, okay, wait, and you know, and just as a human person, and the reality of like passions and emotions and feelings, like that's only going to get a 16-year-old boy with hormones raging and a girl so far, right? I mean, that's just reality. And the flip side of that is that even as a church, I think there's room for inviting people into this conversation in such a way that we tell teenagers like, but you know what, even if you do break the moral, like even if you go too far, like we still love you. Yeah. Because the reality is like we have to have these conversations with teens so they don't feel, because it's not that Catholics don't get abortions, you know? It's not that our teenage girls are not getting pregnant. But we have to be unafraid to talk with them about that.
That's correct. That's right.
Yeah, and there are. I mean, this is one of those topics. You talk about abortion, you talk about theology of the body, you talk about sex, abstinence, that nobody wants to talk about.
They don't. Oh my gosh, it's like my parents taught me not to talk about the dinner table. Religion, politics. And I'm like, perfect. People ask me at dinner when I'm writing, and I'm like,
yeah.
You really want to go there?
But that's such a disservice to people in general, is when we don't talk about it, then when young people find themselves in those situations,
they Google a bot.
That's what I was about to say. It's not a matter of if, but when. They're going to find the information somehow, and I'd rather them find it from the love of the church that is.
And there's shame in that to approach the place that should be, the place of love and healing. And there is a complete, well, I did this so I can no longer be Catholic.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually explaining a little bit of that in my homily today, because when Jesus talks about, that apart from me you can do nothing, I'm the vine, my Father's the vine grower, and you are the branches, and you can't live as a branch disconnected from the vine.
Right.
But what Jesus gives us through the church is the ability to miraculously be a branch that's separated and yet grafted back on. I mean, that's what reconciliation is. And that's that healing balm of the church.
Well, sometimes our branch starts to wither, and we turn around and go, well, guess I can't, and we cut it off ourselves, and it's like, wait.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we need to be pruned. Yeah. And so we self-sever.
Yeah.
And then we go, well, I'm not on the vine anymore, so I might as well live it up, because this is all there is.
Yeah.
And while there's still some nutrients in this dead stick, I'm going to do as much as I can with it before. And that's really how the world looks really at the body,
right?
Is as a stick that's dying. And so I got to do all these things that I can, because being alive is just getting ready to be dead for a really long time. And that's just it's a limited way, and it is a way that bespeaks of a culture that knows not its creator, that doesn't know the vine grower. And so it's really interesting when you talk about the theology of the body, and we will a little bit more, that's what John Paul II kind of puts forth, is that within our own bodies we can ascribe things to our creator that is written in the way that our bodies work and move. And so with that tease, we'll have to take a little bit of a break, but stay right there. The Catholic Underground continues after this. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. Turn then, most gracious Advocate, thine eyes of mercy towards us, and after this our exile, show unto us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary. Oh yeah, it is indeed the Catholic Underground. You found us, and we're glad you have. Happy to have you. You're always welcome on our welcome mat. I'm Father Chris, joined by Kathleen Lee. Sarah Denny joins us as our fill-in, but it's like she's been here forever.
Yeah.
Also, we got Jeff up in space and Ed running the video on our video feed. By the way, if you do like to watch Catholic Underground happening, you can do so on Sunday evenings on Facebook, on YouTube, and, I think at CatholicUnderground.tv. And you can join in the chat, as many of you are doing, and watch along with us. We've been talking about, quite honestly, sex education. We've been talking about the beauty of the body, what the world says about how we're made, and then what God tells us through our bodies about how we are made, and I dare say even why we are made. And so Sarah Denny is joining us because she has a particular field of study in women's studies, but also working its way into the bioethical field. So looking at the morality, looking at the ethics from a medical standpoint, looking at how the body's made, its biology, and all of these things, and you're attempting to bring them together.
Yes.
Like one would build a bridge. Perhaps.
Exactly.
All of these little strands come together and make a cable, and before you know it, you've got the thing that suspends the bridge. So,
and I would say that the bridge actually is the human body. I mean, that's the linchpin. If we understand the body, from both a biological perspective as well as a philosophical, theological reality, then we understand the person in ways that I think we've just missed up to this point.
Which is exactly what the documents of the Second Vatican Council tell us in Lumen Gentium, right? No, it's Gaudium Spes, that it is Jesus Christ himself who reveals man to himself most perfectly. And so if we want to know who God is, then we really only need to look to the biology of Jesus Christ and the humanity of Jesus Christ, and then therefore his divinity as well. Which,
on that point, just to know, one of my favorite things about that too is, that's on the cross. I mean, this is what he is saying. Literally with his body, he is speaking the words that he spoke the night before. He's saying, this is my body given up for you.
Yeah.
And so too, then we see like God didn't just pop into the world as a 2-year-old. He went through the very human reality of being within the womb of a woman. And so too, Our Lady in and through her body said, and just like every mother says, I mean, if you look at the table upon which a woman, if she has to have a C-section and she's in surgery, I mean, it's cruciform in a certain sense, you know, and she's saying like, this is my body given up for you. So I think that's incredible how the Lord, it's true. He's stamped right in our very bodies, our vocation, and our vocation is self-donation and self-gift.
And he's more than willing to do that for us. And whenever we experience those crucifixive moments in our lives,
which will definitely come.
Which will definitely come.
Bloody and messy, and praise God for the sacraments, because the Eucharist is what gives us the grace to.
That's right. Exactly. And it is Jesus who reveals that to us.
Amen.
So we know what our culture, our culture that's oriented towards death, of being, a stick in the mud, as it were, right? Our culture that's oriented towards what John Paul II calls a culture of death. But what about we who are the children of light, those who have been enlightened by baptism, those who, even who are not baptized, who are still called to the light that is the light of God? What do we say? What do we do? Because, we certainly, those of you, I mean, obviously I'm preaching to the choir here for some of you, but what do we do? Because I know the only field in which I have the ability to begin to say what the Lord says about my body is in the crucible of my family, right? The altar of my home, if I'm a parent. And then that has to spill its way over into my parish life, into my civic life, and then certainly into the culture at large, because that's really how these things flow outward.
Absolutely.
Right? You know. So what do we believe? How does an actual like Joe or Jane Catholic encounter, sex education? Johnny or Karen perhaps, or ninth grade, they're going to be doing the sex education class. So what do I do?
I think number one is for parents. Any parents or grandparents. I want to say very clearly, there's no owner's manual to a child. And oftentimes I'm giving presentations and people are like, oh, I wish I would have known this before. And it's like, don't get caught up in what you didn't know before, because God's mercy is such that he works everything together for good for those that love him. That's a promise in Romans 8, right? But now as a church, the reality is that John Paul II wrote Theology of the Body, right? Late 1970s, early 1980s, it was delivered as a series of audiences. But Theology of the Body is a reflection of the gospel, right? What he's tapping into is the lens of the gospel seen through the love between man and woman, because he is showing us that between man and woman, there's such a spousal love that is the dissimilarity is always greater than the similarity, but it reflects to us on this side of heaven. It's the greatest analogy of what the love of God is, because it's an invitation to lay down your life for the beloved, right? And there's a mutual submission under Christ's headship,
which is why it even gets raised to the dignity of the sacrament of marriage, right?
It's beautiful, exactly. But as parents, I just encounter, they're like, well, wait, I don't know this, I don't know that. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what you do or you do not know. I will say the most important thing you can do for your child is to have the conversation. The temptation is to be so overwhelmed by what you don't know that you then in fear, and I understand it on a human level, but in fear, you don't have the conversation at all. And that is where we have missed the mark, right? Is that, the family is the basic unit of society. The family is where the child is going to learn love, also how to deal with conflict. And the reality is no family is perfect, unless you're the Holy Family. So it's going to be pretty messed up. So don't get caught up in all the things I'm going to do wrong. But if you can look your son or daughter in the eyes, and if they can hear from a place of love, that out of love you are saying, hey, there's things that are happening in your body as you grow and as you change that you can understand too, because you were an adolescent. But that there's choice points, right? and to know yourself enough and to know the gift of who you are enough that love sometimes says no. And love sometimes says yes.
That's right.
But it depends upon like what is happening in your life. And what the church is inviting us to realize is that marriage is, I would describe it as the only sacrament that's strong enough, right? It's the only union that's strong enough to hold the weight of something as heavy and sacred as human sex. Because if you're going to be that close to someone, I mean, there is no, it's not like, oh yeah, we're just friends. I'm like, no, you are not. Like the hormones that are oxytocin, the bonding hormone, all these kinds of things we go into in a scientific perspective that confirm what the church knows just about the human person from a philosophical perspective, right? And these conversations are important because if we don't have them with our children, they're going to find, they're going to go to the bot.
They're going to go to the bot, or they're going to go to the locker room.
And there's no shame in them. This is the thing. There's no shame in them wanting to know.
No, absolutely not.
They need to ask these questions. We just need to not run from them when they're asking them.
That's correct. And that's the little Gnostic heresy that's present in our society today is the truth about our bodies, the truth about sex is not hidden knowledge. It's not. It's not hidden knowledge. It's revealed to us in our very bodies. And it's revealed to us by the sources that can tell us the truth.
Amen.
You know, and that's why Genesis doesn't shy away from that. That's why the Old Testament doesn't shy away from it. That's why the New Testament doesn't shy away from it. Have you read Paul's letters lately? He spends a good deal of time talking about morality. Why? Because people, when their bodies say yes and they should say no, the church then has to enter into that realm and say, okay, well, let's look about why we are made. What are we doing?
Exactly. And it really comes down in this culture, especially to, right, the word freedom. What's freedom? Like reproductive autonomy, women's rights, all these things. Yeah. And if freedom is not that thing that's outside of that, you can like legalize for me, but as a human person from within, I'm free to choose in any moment. I am the only one that can choose for Sarah if I am truly free. And it's training the person to see that sometimes my body is going to desire or want certain things that in the moment, the objective truth tells me this is not what's good for me or for this other person. And so it's not because I hate my body. No. It's the very opposite. It's because I love my body, myself, and this person in such a way that I'm going to because freedom isn't the end in itself. The reality of what the church is teaching, what the church can offer the conversation in sex education is that freedom, when it's not given away, you enter into despair, right? But freedom is meant for love. It exists, quote from JP2, is freedom exists for the sake of love, right? We're meant to, like he says, and I think it's Gaudium et Spes as well, it says, man can only find himself through a sincere gift of self.
That's right.
You know, and in a culture, for some people, the gift language is really difficult. They're like, you can't tell me what to do. And it's like, okay, when you take away all the charged components of it and you just back up and you say, but who wouldn't want a person to look at them and say, you know what? I know all those pieces about you that maybe you're really struggling with, that you struggle to accept about yourself, and I love you there.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's what human love is called to be. But the divine, the grace is what gives us that strength. So the church has a lot to offer the conversation in sex education, and it's more than just like don't have sex until you're married.
No, right.
Right? And theology of the body, that to me is a huge one of the key components. Is what theology of the body says is that, look, God made you in such a way that your body has this sacramental reality. Your body, in a physical sense, reveals who you are as a person, right? And in and through your body, you speak a language. So I tell teenagers, I'm like, look, you go into a job interview, if you throw your keys on the table and you sit back with your arms crossed, you're speaking a language. You're saying a lot, even if you say no words. And even girls I would counsel who were in crisis pregnancy situations, right? I mean, they can understand that. They can understand like, oh, when I do this, it communicates to him this, right? And so I think there's just like, that's where the invitation comes in as a church. And I say this, a lot of people, they're like, theology of the body, what? And I'm not saying you have to go read all those audiences because it's thick, right?
Thick. Yeah, and we mean that the way that it's actually defined.
Yeah, it's actually this big. Yeah. But truly, it's an invitation to speak from a place of honesty as a man or as a woman to the people in your life that you care about, to the young people that are looking up to you, and to say, hey, I know this is awkward for both of us, but your desires are good.
Yeah.
Your sexual passion is actually good. That's not the problem. You're not the problem. But when you live your life in a way that you're living in truth, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. It's not a providence gospel, but there's a fuller freedom that you can experience, an abundance. God wants abundance for your life, that in a sense there's a merciful, it's like a padded playground, right? Yeah. Like he's guiding you to then, so that when you're ready to have children, because, girls can understand this when I talk to them, like think about the difference between a 15-year-old who gets the pregnancy test and it's positive versus, you know, the 28-year-old who's married gets a they're both crying, but why are they crying for very different reasons? Right. And it's not because she's a horrible person. No. It's because sex is so very good.
Yes.
That God and his desire for man and woman is that you would be with a person who is like, I am giving literally their body is communicating what they're willing to say with their words, and their words are communicating what they're willing to say with their bodies. They're not being duplicitous. It's I give my whole self to you, no matter what the end result is.
Yeah. Saint John in the scriptures today, in the letter today, the second reading, that's effectively what John is saying. He says in his first letter, he says, "Children, let us love not in word or speech, but in deed and truth." And that's really what the step up to marriage is. It's saying, I'm willing to love in deed. In fact, we say that. That's like the pejorative thing is to have sex is to do the deed, right? Well, what John is telling us in his letter is, let us love not in word or speech, but let us love in deed and truth. And deed and truth are written in the very ways that our bodies desire to pour ourselves out for the other.
Absolutely. And a point of that I love how you said that, Father, because of course the Holy Spirit would plan it that way. But truly, what the culture wants us to think is that sex is this isolated act of recreation. Yeah. Right? And doesn't matter who you do it, doesn't matter when, whatever. Okay, well, let's watch, a rom-com and like, wow, that was the first date. They don't even know each other's name. We don't know. The reality is that we're like drowning in all this information about sex. Everyone's talking about sex. But if we stop and think about it, we're like, no one's really talking about it. Yeah. Like in the depths of what that means. Yeah. And sex, what the Lord intends for us is that it is one part of the grandeur picture of this. I say adventure. People might think it's cheesy, but it's truly, I'm like, you want a human adventure, you love a person, and you commit to them for the rest of your life. Yep. And that is what Christ is inviting us to. No matter what your vocation is, it's going to look different, but it's real, right? And when you look in the eyes of another person, it's like, I can either run from this or I can show up. Like we're talking about show up, right? That's right. And so if you look at it from that perspective, that there's a much wider perspective, and we teach youth, like, no, sex is one piece of a grander picture. Yeah. That, for instance, they say, like, they'll say sex begins in the kitchen. Like, that's not something to be afraid to tell young people. It's like, what are they saying? In deed and in truth, like, you're helping the woman clean the kitchen. Yep. What a man is communicating to a woman in that position is, I care about you for more than just this physical pleasure we can have at this other time, but it's like, I care about your whole person. I want you to feel supported. Right. And so often, it says in Genesis, what we're talking about, this isn't a lived, easy reality just because we know the truth, right? No, it's like, it's very clear. He will put enmity between the woman and the man. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. And they are good Catholic men, and they are good Catholic women, and we are constantly, like, we have to face ourselves and our poverty, right? And what's the struggle in loving another person? And if we can show adolescents, like, sex is one piece of this grander invitation to learn how to love, right, then things can become a little bit more clear. And so even though you might not have the words, by your example to your children, you are the best sex educators on the planet.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
There's no perfect way. There's no perfect way. But if you can show up and speak truth in love, and you can admit when you've fallen, and you're like, dang, Johnny, like, I'm really sorry. That was, that was a really selfish move of mine. I apologize. Or, even as, I can't imagine, I'm not a dude, but like, to imagine like a man looking at his son and being like, the way I spoke to your mother last night, in the moment, I really enjoyed that. But after the fact, that was completely disrespectful. Like that is authentic sex education, because sex is not the only thing. Sex is one part. Our sexuality is a part of our humanity. That's right. You're educating them in what it means to be human.
Which is why we talk about the crisis of manhood. The crisis of manhood is not the physical act of men being able to have sex. The crisis of manhood is not understanding what it means to be a man, right? To what it means to be made in God's image and likeness as one who offers himself as gift.
Exactly.
Right? And we feel the same way. I guess you could say there's a crisis of womanhood.
Absolutely.
Yes. Is that correct, Kathleen?
Yeah,
who speaks?
I was just thinking about Sarah as you were saying, like, just the example of what real. Like the reality of it is that, we have all these things on TV that are, all these celebrities and all these people who are just like really celebrated for their promiscuity and they're, they are going out with 50 different people. And then like, it's like a VH1 behind the scenes, like story. You find out 30
it's
years
always
later
a crash and burn
that they were like, what is my life? And I'm like, I know. Like, let me, because I know a little bit of theology of the body. And I'm like, oh, and you see it in such a different view. And when working with young people, you see them like idolize, so-and-so because she wore nothing on stage at the, the award show. And they're like, that's so awesome. And I'm like, as someone who knows, like,
she's hurting. She's hurting. Yeah.
She's hurting, and he is hurting, and they're hurting each other, and they're like, what? And that's the reality of it. And nobody ever shows that on any, music video.
Which is why, Kathleen, don't you think it's interesting that whenever somebody nowadays that celebrates 25 years of marriage, right, the fatted calf is killed.
Yeah.
Because we think that that's a thing, that's somehow miraculous. I don't know how you've done it. Well, we don't either. And that's the mystery of how sex works, right? Yeah. Because sex is a much larger picture. Right. It's our bodies revealing a deeper mystery unto each other for the totality of our life. Which is also, if I may, why celibacy is important in the life of the church.
Absolutely.
Because it shows that in the midst of all the stuff that's happening between husband and wife, as our sex is revealing something about our relationship in a grand scale, the priest then stands at the head of the church offering sacrifice, and he's pointing you even farther. If you think that this grand adventure that is your sexual relationship one to another, revealing one to each other through self-gift, both the physical act and in the unfolding of the life of the family, just wait.
Yeah.
Just you wait, because the Holy Communion that you receive at Mass in the state of grace is going to propel you towards a relationship that is going to surpass even the best moments of your marriage.
Absolutely. And so theology of the body, just for those that don't know, to give you a really quick crash course, it starts with talking about original man, right? So what was it like before the fall? And I think that's a powerful thing for anyone of any age, like, because God, his original plan for us was not this enmity between man and woman.
No.
Right,
we were, in perfect communion with ourselves, with each other, with nature, right? With the Lord. And then original sin broke all of that. And so in Christ, the second part, right, is historical man, as we are in history. And Christ enters. This is the beautiful thing, is like the incarnation is that God, in his divinity, decided, I will take on humanity myself. And then he showed us, and again, in and through his very body, the theology of the body is that the body speaks the language, right? And communicates to us.
The word is made flesh, even before he speaks.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so he shows us, like, this is what it means. Like, this is what we're called to. Like, the new Eve, the new Adam. The new Adam says, over my dead body will you get to her. And the new Eve says, I will allow for you to do this for me. Yeah. And receives it, right? And they both suffer a crucifixion, right? His is a physical, hers is the spiritual, but they both experience that death.
That's right.
And so too, like, this is what marriage is. But the third part of theology of the body is this eschatological man, this eschatological vision, meaning at the end time. And the beautiful thing is that every single woman is called to be a daughter, and then as she grows, a sister. From there, right, a bride and a mother. Every single man is called to be a son, a brother, a husband, and a father.
Yeah.
And on a spiritual level, that's every single human person. Yeah. Yes, some might participate in all of those in the biological capacity, but your life does not lack value if you don't have that, because first and foremost, it comes through the spiritual. So your life, Father, testifies to the fact that ultimately in heaven, where God said there will be no marriage, which, don't get me wrong, sometimes I'm like, come on, Lord, why would you do that? He's God, I'm not.
That's
the point is such that marriage is the mirror on this side of heaven that reflects back to me and to the world. This is how God loves. So why do people struggle with who God is? I mean, the divorce rate right now, how high is that, right? That is our greatest analogy. It's like we took the hammer and we smashed it, but there's always hope. And hope comes through grace, right? The grace of the sacraments is God's putting those pieces back together. Yep. And then he's able to say, through eschatological man, through the hope that we have in heaven, he's saying, look, I'm having it better for you than if this had never happened, because, oh, happy fault, right? I've now become man myself, and I'm bringing all of you with me through to eternity. So that for the rest of eternity, for the rest of your existence, because you will exist for forever, you will never be separated from me again.
And that is why, Jeff, in the book of Revelation, the feast that is the Mass that never ends in eternity is in fact a wedding banquet.
Dun-da-da. I love
there you go. Spoiler alert. We know how it ends.
The bride say come.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So that has been Sarah Denny and the work that she's doing. And
In a nutshell.
that's right.
I've read 400 pages of that.
I was going to say, and furthermore, trying to wrap up your dissertation at this point.
Yes.
Whenever in time you're watching this, if you're watching it this week, or if you're watching it sometime in the year 3029, because Jesus is Lord of time, you can pray for Sarah.
Oh, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, please do. Because as you can imagine, both Sarah and Kathleen have fantastic work to do in the apostolate. That is life.
Indeed.
In these beautiful enclaves of the church in which you find yourself. And that's what makes me as a proud father, to see this work in the apostolate that happens outside of the sanctuary. I get to feed the kids and then send them to school. So I love doing that.
Father, we're so grateful for you. You give the lay vocation the grace that we need to do what we're called to.
And the beautiful thing about it is it is reciprocal.
Yeah.
You are the ones who allow me to be father and understand how I am husband. And you are the ones who allow me to understand what it means to be brother as well. And that's a great gift to the celibate life for sure.
Yeah.
So you can see how all the pieces fit together, and that's why sex is good. You know what else is good? That part of the show that we like to call
the CU Pick of the Week.
And for our first pick of the week, can I go to Sarah first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So. Yeah, normally we would go to Kathleen in a guest hosting situation.
Much to Olivia's chagrin.
That's right. So Sarah, what do you got for us for a pick of the week?
So there's a movie I watched for the first time a few weeks ago. It's called Babette's Feast. Highly recommend it. I think everyone should watch it because it basically talks about everything we talked about earlier, not sex education per se, but the beauty of the Catholic vision, which is that the senses are very good.
Yeah.
And in short, without giving the plot away, it's about a woman who has to go basically run from the country she's in because of fighting. And she lives with these two sisters. And then one day she offers to make them a feast. And you see, and I encourage you to watch it. And when you watch it, look at how even the colors change. But what it's showing, and a character in the movie actually comments on this, that when there's like a meal that you're eating and it's like phenomenal, he compares it to like a love affair. There's this wedding of the spirit and the body. And that's something that the Catholic vision is trying to show us, is that we want to wed the two together. So we don't need to be afraid or ashamed of our desires or our senses, but we want to point them forward to that call of the Spirit, right, to wholeness and to truth and to authentic love. So Babette's Feast, it's from '87, so it's not like recent, but it's a classic.
Where can you find it? Is it on Netflix?
I would be willing to bet you it's streamable on.
Probably, and this is one of the ones it's probably on some Pope's top 100. Maybe someone told me that. I don't know.
I do believe 100. It is in the top 100.
It's a human
the Vatican
movie
list.
Yeah,
of movies
everyone
to watch.
should watch it for human formation.
That would not surprise me.
Yeah. I can say that it's been on my list to watch, but I haven't done it yet. I'm sorry.
You're gonna love it.
Yeah, I'll have to do in my free time.
Maybe, in all your free time. Maybe not this
Every
week,
now and then when I need a little, come down from red alert thing, that's what I will do.
There you go.
Kathleen, what is your pick of the week?
Well, this week, if you're listening live, what's today, 2nd? I don't
It is the 2nd?
Who knows? You want to know why? Because I'm a teacher. I don't even know what planet I'm on. That's where we're at.
She knows it's somewhere near the end.
Yes.
Real life.
We are nearing the end. But this week is Teacher Appreciation Week. Now.
Yeah. Some would say that's timeless.
Thanks,
Thank
Kathleen.
I also heard today that it was very sad. The teacher on TikTok was like, if your job has to have an appreciation week, and I was like, scroll next, because it was something like, this
we
year.
We don't appreciate y'all enough, especially this year.
Well, look. We could have a whole show on that. I do it for the children and the love of the Lord. Okay, but this week is Teacher Appreciation Week, and my school has put out a couple of things. They sent out something to the parents. If you're listening to this, 4 weeks from now, guess what? It still can be Teacher Appreciation Week.
Sure enough.
So some things that my school has put out. Monday is Cheers to My Teacher. Bring a teacher their favorite beverage or a gift card for coffee. Tuesday is You Make Us Bloom. Pick a flower or make a spiritual bouquet.
Nice.
Wednesday is Teachers Are Noteworthy. I encourage your students to make a handwritten card to bring to their teacher. Those things are, I'm like, every day when I
think better in crayon.
When I'm having a class where I'm like, sit down and be quiet, somebody comes up with I do you this, and I'm like, Thursday is, well, we're having lunch, so lunch is on us. Lunch is on them. But and then Friday is our teachers are a gift to us, and so they're encouraged to bring a small gift.
That's right. Not a ceramic apple.
No.
I mean, you could.
That would be nice.
Yeah, Kathleen probably doesn't have a ceramic apple.
I do not. But teachers, I can say from experience that this is not a cry for woe is me. No. It's been rough. It's been real rough. And so any little thing that you can show your teachers, I guarantee you they'll appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Ding, ding.
My pick of the week seems to pale in comparison.
Oh,
but
it's pretty cool.
I like it. Show it.
It is
what?
It is the Alex Ross Marvel Comics poster book.
Nice.
So Alex Ross is an illustrator, and he grew up as a kid wanting to draw Marvel comics. He wanted to draw comic books, but he, as he kind of grew up, he had a desire to learn, basically figure drawing. So study art from life, and he always wanted the characters to be real. Yeah. And so he draws practically photorealistic renderings of the Marvel and DC characters. And he was asked to do a poster in the Marvel offices, or not a poster, but like a wall, a mural. Mm-hmm. And so these are all of the individual, let's see, like here's Thor. He was asked to paint all of the individual Marvel Comics characters.
Yeah.
And then you have all the individual ones, and they can be posters in their own right. And then in the back of the book is the big poster itself of all of
Wow.
So for you listening on the radio, it's a heavy book, but it clocks in at around $25. So it's not
really not bad.
For full color,
because that was really impressive.
For several hundred pages, well, it's not, maybe 100 pages, maybe 60 pages of artwork, of color artwork, and then a description of the Marvel character. So it's also a way to kind of look and find some Marvel characters.
What would you say the dimensions are like? Is that like a 14 by
it's
17?
It maybe not quite 16 by 20. Okay, that's okay. But yeah, it's a big book too. So the Alex Ross Marvel Comics poster book.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so that'll be my pick of the week. I'll put it in the show notes. The show notes are, of course, always at CatholicUnderground.tv, and you can search for our most recent episodes, and you can go pretty much all the way back, actually. I wouldn't recommend stuff in the early catalog. It's a little rough audio-wise. It's because Jeff wasn't on board yet.
That's true.
In the early days. But you know what? You've been helpful, because as always, the Catholic Underground is made possible by viewers and listeners and prayer warriors and benefactors like you. You can become an official Undergrounder just by listening to what Jeff has to say.
Yeah, you go to Catholic Underground, that is CatholicUnderground.com/donate.
That's right. And some of you did that this week, actually, so thank you.
Wonderful.
You can also help us out by letting others know about us. Isn't that right, Jeff?
Yes, indeed. And, we need the stars, the hearts, the likes.
All those little things you can click that
and
let
if
other
you can
people
leave a
know.
review,
Yeah, you got
by
it.
all means, say so and be nice.
Yeah, please do. Please do. If you want to write a nastygram, then send it to Kathleen. She'd love to read it and respond.
Yeah, send it my way.
She will respond.
She will respond. Speaking of which, our panelist has indeed been Kathleen Lee at Kaylee626 on Instagram. Thank you, Kathleen.
Anytime.
Also, the unrepeatable Sarah Denny, because that's how God made you.
Dun-da-da.
That's right. We're glad that you're here. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you all so much for having me.
Oh, yeah. You're
really
welcome back anytime.
Thank you. And if I can plug really quick, go to naturalwomanhood.com or .org. That's going to give you a lot of research from the scientific perspective for
Natural
parents.
Womanhood.
Natural Womanhood.
Okay, all
Highly
right.
recommend it. But thank you all for having me. This was such a joy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Jeff Blackwell in space. He's our technical director at Jeff Blackwellis on Twitter.
Privilege.
Ed Ball is our video director. Jim Hayes is our research assistant with his crew in the lab. And you know me. I'm Father Chris Decker. You can find me on all the things at Digital Catholic is my handle. You've been listening to the Catholic Underground, cutting through the noise so that you can find that still small voice. We'll see you next time.
From the Catholic Underground.